Hello friends, and even those who are not so friendly, again, Happy New Year. Today is January 3rd, 2025, and in keeping with the theme of the pseudoscience of Bigfoot, and again, Bigfoot may exist, and some of the evidence that we already know about might be valid evidence. I'm not going to look at that today. We're only going to look at evidence that can be falsified, disproven. If the experimental hypothesis is that in this picture, in this video, we have a juvenile sasquatch, that's your hypothesis, your working experimental hypothesis. And the null hypothesis, of course, would be that is not a Sasquatch. We don't know what it is, but it's not a Sasquatch. So in the last two videos, I expanded on this theme by using the 2007 Jacobs Pennsylvania trail cam photos, which are found on bfro.net, and these were trail cam photos of the first one we see is two bear cubs, clearly two bear cubs. The next two were pounced on by the Bigfoot community as being juvenile Sasquatches, for reasons that you can go back to the previous two videos and see why that claim is being made. Here is a continuation of that subject. We have what looks like a YouTuber by the name of Pennsylvania Wilds, and the title of this video is Jacobs Bigfoot Unfalsifiable. And the video features an interview with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, and it sounds like Linda Howe, what's that chick's name? Linda Moulton Howe. That's her. It sounds like her. That's who I think is interviewing Dr. Meldrum. This video gives me much entertainment. It's a short video. Linda, the interviewer and the interviewee, Dr. Meldrum, speak in very technical sounding words with measurements and stuff, and later on in the video you'll see measures to the millimeter of these grainy photographs taken at a distance at night, but they can somehow measure the length of the limbs present in the still frames as in millimeters. How big is a millimeter? Just one of these little lines is a millimeter. Yeah, that's pretty small. Then 0 to 1 is 1 centimeter. And this rule is 10 centimeters. So these guys are really, give them an A for effort, but is it valid? Is it reliable? I say no. Now the first thing I want to say about this video is the title, Jacobs Bigfoot Unfalsifiable. And I want to talk about what unfalsifiable means. Unfalsifiable means something is not capable of being proven false. It can also mean that there's no scientific way to prove that something is not true. So I don't know if this guy, Pennsylvania Wilds, realizes, and maybe that individual does or maybe not, to be unfalsifiable is not a credit to your theory. In fact, it's what you would find in religion. Religion is unfalsifiable. No matter what you say about a specific phenomenon like the parting of the Red Sea, we can't really disprove it, especially if it's something so far in the past, or there are other things that cannot be proven. In fact, there's a fantastic short video on YouTube. The guy says, in my hand is an invisible marble. Now, with my hand closed, you cannot, this is an unfalsifiable claim. It can't be tested and it can't be observed. It can't be repeated. No testing, no observation, no measurement. I'm holding in my hand an invisible marble. It's unfalsifiable because you cannot disprove that I'm holding an invisible marble. If I open my hand, that doesn't prove anything because the marble is invisible. X-rays, sonograms, etc. There was no way for you to disprove, falsify my claim. Therefore, it's not subject to the rigors of the scientific method. It falls outside of science because it can't be proven, it can't be disproven. That makes it an unscientific claim. Hey, maybe I'm right, maybe I am holding an invisible marble. But that's an unscientific claim because I cannot prove it and you cannot disprove it. It's unfalsifiable. So this title, Jacob's Bigfoot Unfalsifiable, that's not flattering to the hypothesis that the subject of the 2007 Jacobs trail cam photos are Sasquatch. You can make the claim, but it's an unfalsifiable claim. If we can either prove or disprove it, you're saying here's a thing, here's a blob, and there was a time when people were saying, oh, there's a dark splotch in that photograph. That's Bigfoot. Prove me wrong, homie. You can't. So I don't know if this was tongue-in-cheek or if the guy doesn't know the definition of falsifiable, unfalsifiable. But in science, when you're writing a thesis or a dissertation, your hypotheses must be falsifiable. Otherwise, the paper won't be peer-reviewed. It can be an article in a creative writing periodical, but not a scientific journal. So, in terms of science, the hypothesis must be falsifiable, not unfalsifiable. If you're claiming that that the Jacobs photo as a juvenile Sasquatch is unfalsifiable, you're not really helping the cause. You're saying it's, religious. And along that theme, there's nothing to stop you from, and people do claim, well, the thing is metaphysical. It teletransports. It's hyper reality dimension of some kind. It can't be pinpointed. We can't really, as soon as you bring it into focus, it disappears. And you can make those claims, and that Bigfoot is telepathically communicating with people, and I've made friends with this one, and it visits me every Friday night over the fence. We're sharing a drink. I can't disprove that, but if I can't even test it, it's really not worth making the news. No. So this video, okay, Jacob's Bigfoot Unfalsifiable, Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. Let's see what we can pick out of this.
And it's intriguing. Obviously the limb proportions are not bear-like. It seems
Now, at this part, I'm going to have something to say about this. This is an interpretation. And this is a cool one because the creature does look like this in this photo of one of the 3 still shots that are available to the public, courtesy of the BFRO.net website. Picture number 1 is 2 bear cubs. Those are not in dispute by anybody. Then pictures 2 and 3 occur 28 minutes after the bear cub pictures. And then the next 2, so there are 3 in the series, the next 2 photos, image 2, image 3, are only 26 seconds apart. So I am making one assumption that they are the same creature because they're in the camera captured the image 26 seconds apart, and it looks like the same creature but in different poses. And in image 2 is really what makes this controversial. Now, also, right off the bat, I see some liberties. We're going to see this outline is outlining features that don't really exist, that are not part of the... And namely, I'm looking at that back extended foot where it shows like toe, and then he goes on to say the rest of the foot is covered by leaves. And they're giving that outline a little bit of a human persuasion to it. But that profile doesn't really exist in the photo. So let's go on and see what else, other funny things Dr. Meldrum will say.
The proportions look more like a chimpanzee.
Yeah, and here, looking at that photo, image number 2, when I first saw this photo, I thought it was a chimp, and then in my last couple of videos, I explained why it wouldn't be a wild chimpanzee in the forests of northern Pennsylvania in September. It's not a habitat that you can live in or survive the winter. But it did look like one, but it's not a chimp, it's a bear. Okay, so let's continue.
Than they do like a human.
Yep. The photos do give that appearance, but if you look at my last 2 videos, again, I demonstrate why there is no creature making this pose. It's an illusion.
The decades of the reports of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, all of the film and or sketches have been on what we would say were adults, large bodies, and there have been some eyewitness accounts of large Sasquatch, Bigfoot, with small versions, like children or young. Matthew Moneymaker.
Yeah, I love this. Okay, torso, 476 millimeters. Remember, here's some guy looking at a grainy photo, black and white, grainy out of focus photo, black and white, taken at a little bit of a distance from the trail cam to the subject, however far that was. But remember now, some smart scientific sounding person here is able to determine the exact length to the millimeter. Look at that. Torso, 476 millimeters. Left arm, 560 millimeters. Okay. You trust those measurements? I do not. I question that. And then there's something down at the bottom there, some text I can't read.
I was saying that one of the questions has always been, well, if this is real, then where are the young? Where are the offspring of these large ones? Could it be that this is the first clear photograph?
Okay, let's talk about this outline here. It does look like a chimp bending over.
A clear photograph, even if it's an infrared.
All right, let's continue here.
Hind limbs are exceptionally underdeveloped. And you're right, the limb proportions would better approximate those of a non-human primate, adult non-human primate. These animals, presumably, if they're like other great...
Bear can't do this position. bear is not doing that position. Even here, I can see the bear's face. He's pointed in our direction, more or less. A bear can't do this position. Now, of course, they're referring to the position of the baby over to the right, because the creature to the left is not doing that position. Resembles it, sort of, but that's not the position that that creature is doing. That bear is standing upright, and his, or her, right leg is extended, taking the step forward.
And especially the newborn, the hind limbs are exceptionally underdeveloped. And you're right, the limb proportions would better approximate those of a non-human primate, adult non-human primate. These animals, presumably, if they're like other great apes, also have that period of dependency, but may become ambulatory at a much earlier time.
These animals, if they're like other great apes, first of all, the creature in that photo is not an ape. But Dr. Meldrum, and he said this in the past, he refers to Bigfoot as if it's something, a gorilla-like creature, a primate, a big ape. Yeah, I know humans are primates, and if the Bigfoot exists, that's a primate too. But clearly, when you look at a person standing up, and then if you look at the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot, that is not a gorilla. It looks more like a huge man covered with fur in the face when it turns to. Looks human, the kind of nose that's sticking out instead of smushed up, which you see in a lot of, and I know I use these in my thumbnails, the AI generated sasquatch. Always look like a sort of a weirdish orangutan or gorilla, rather than more human-like features, which I believe, and I don't know, if the Bigfoot did exist, I want it to look more human. I think Dr. Meldrum thinks it looks more gorilla-like, or not, like a big chimpanzee or maybe an orangutan, but not human. And I have heard him in the past say we should treat the Bigfoot as if it's an animal and not a human. I've heard him say specifically it's more animal-like than human. I think it's more human-like than animal. If I ever did run into a Bigfoot in the woods and I had a rifle and I looked at and it looked at me, and if I saw that human face, I would think it's murder to shoot one. I don't think right at that point in time, if I had to draw a bead on it, well, I wouldn't draw a bead on it because I would be looking at something that I would consider it murder if I killed one. And weirdly, I don't know if they exist. I kind of, rationally, I don't think they exist. And maybe if they did at one time, they don't anymore. But if states do have laws prohibiting the shooting of one, just in case, I think that's appropriate. I would buy into that, just in case. Because that we need one for science, but I don't think we need one or should have one. I don't think the ends justify the means in that case. So let's go on here. It's not a chimpanzee. The posture here that they're outlining does look like a chimp. Yeah, and that's what I first thought when I first saw it.
Still not exhibit the full-blown underdeveloped. And you're right, the limb proportions would better approximate those of a non-human primate, adult non-human primate. These animals, presumably, if they're like other great apes, also have that period of dependency, but may become ambulatory at a much earlier time, but may still not exhibit the full-blown limb proportions of an adult, and may have, like you were describing, much more chimpanzee-like. So that raises a very, very interesting possibility, absolutely. There's a lot we don't know, and we really don't know what the development of the foot of a Sasquatch might look like through its growth trajectory. Can they be distinguished from human tracks? If they can't, I mean, that raises some curious questions about just the mechanics of the gait and locomotor adaptations of this species, but
Meaning, why would it be so human-like?
exactly, because the characteristics that we're distinguishing, you were using to distinguish a human track from a Sasquatch track are, in the Sasquatch, the lack of an arch, the greater breadth, the relatively longer toes, the much greater breadth of the heel, particularly in contrast
This is
to
a
the
good-
range of the foot. But maybe
Now they're getting into unfalsifiable. What is falsifiable and unfalsifiable? And Dr. Meldrum is hypothesizing, what if this is a juvenile Sasquatch? Well, it looks like a chimpanzee, but how do you explain that? Well, what if juvenile Sasquatches, like other primates, their limb ratios don't develop proportionately with the adult, so that when you're looking at the baby and it's got the bigger head and the small stubby body, and then you look at an adult and the head hasn't grown but the body has grown and the limbs have grown and the ratios change, I guess. So he's making the thing unfalsifiable by explaining away. Everything has an explanation. We've determined nothing about this. We take a bit of there's a lot of forensics going on here. He's saying, well, if this is a juvenile Sasquatch, it looks that way because the limbs of the juvenile Sasquatch haven't developed at the same rate as the limbs of the adult. And I'm not even sure if he's saying that the limbs of the juvenile are longer in proportion to that of the adult, because they keep going on about the length of the arms and legs here. So are they saying that junior Sasquatch has a longer limb ratio? It's not clear, but he's sort of moving around here saying, well, because of this and this and this, and the interviewee, who I think is Linda Moulton Howe, is saying, well, we've never gotten any good photographs of juvenile Sasquatch before, and now they're telling us all about juvenile Sasquatch, but she just admitted we have no evidence of any juvenile Sasquatch ever. So they're concluding this. They've concluded that this is a juvenile Sasquatch based on a very bad photograph, and in this one photograph it does not resemble a bear, and so everything after that is okay, we have here a juvenile Sasquatch, now we have to explain everything about it. But how can you do that? You've never studied, you've never observed a juvenile Sasquatch in the wild. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's say this is the very first picture of a juvenile Sasquatch ever. Image number 2 from the 3-image series. Let's say this is a juvenile Sasquatch. That's all you have to go on. You have nothing else. We don't know it. We don't have another one to compare it to. We don't know. And then the next frame, which I've shown is a bear, but let's say the next one is a Sasquatch, the same creature. So you got 2 pictures and you're inferring an entire scenario of the life and times of the Sasquatch based on this image. Now, of course, we have the endpoints. We've got the adult, the images, the pictures, the photos of the adult Sasquatch. So you're sort of filling it in. I guess it's like, being Richard Leakey and finding a tooth or a jawbone. And I think it's what they did with Gigantopithecus, which I assert has nothing to do with the North American Bigfoot. But we don't have a full skeleton of a Gigantopithecus. We've only got little tiny fragments of the jaw and maybe teeth, and so they've reconstructed this gigantic 10-foot tall orangutan basically, which wouldn't, even if you look at an orangutan and then you imagine how it would be if it would be 10 feet tall. It would look like a 10-foot tall orangutan. It's like a giant sloth looks like a 20-foot version of a sloth. It's not the face. It always goes back to me, the face of the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot, and how that looks not anything like a gorilla. No, it looks more human, like a human with a lot of hair, facial hair. So let's go on and see what other trouble they can get into here.
Maybe some of those features don't manifest themselves to the extent that they're evident in the typical Sasquatch track until the individual has attained a much greater bulk, a much greater weight. And I would expect that if this is a juvenile, that it would be a young adult one. Otherwise, it wouldn't necessarily be there all by itself without a female close by.
Okay, there's a little bit of some weaselly language there. It looks like it says, "Good morning. Unfortunately, we do not have any other pictures like this, but we would not be surprised." And then there was something else that I missed. I think that's by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Unfortunately, we do not have. Alrighty. They speak in very serious, scientific sort of tones here, but in fact, what they're talking about is a bear, and by explaining, not allowing any questioning, like, well, if it's a Sasquatch, why does it, look like this? So also, in abnormal psychology, we say, and these guys are not abnormal, okay, and they're fun. It's a fun thing to be in. But when you learn about paranoid schizophrenia, and the subject can always explain everything. In terms of his conspiracy, the CIA is looking at me. Well, how do you know? Can you prove it? Well, they're really good at hiding, and you go on and on and on. Okay, how do you know that thing out in the woods is a Bigfoot? They're really good at hiding behind trees, and they're good at being invisible like a hobbit. They'll never really get a good picture of one because they're interdimensional beings and telepathic, and they can sense when there's a camera looking at them, and they go fuzzy and they go blurry, and everything gets tweaked to adjust, and really that's the art of storytelling. Like when you're creating a fantasy story or a science fiction story, you go on, well, now what do we do here at this juncture? How did this guy on the planet get 10,000 miles up in space in the next scene? How do we figure that out? And they're doing that with the Jacobs photos. They're taking some very bad photos of a bear, but it doesn't look like a bear, and lucky for them, we don't have any more photos of that creature that are clearer than that. We don't have them, so that's good for them, and it's harder for us. However, it's up to the believer to prove. So they have to prove that it's a bear. They have to prove that it's a Sasquatch. If they're making the claim it's a juvenile Sasquatch, they have to prove that. We want to disprove it. Now, every time we, point out, well, this is the face of the bear, this is the nose, this is the snout, here are the eyes, there are the ears, this is the leg position. something always gets tweaked about that. Like, oh no, either, no, I don't see it, like you might hear in the mob, oh no, it doesn't exist. I don't see it. No, I don't know what you're talking about. Or so, which is denial, willful denial. Or the measurements, like the limb ratio, measuring the leg to the millimeter, you can't really do that. The focus width itself was like at least an inch. So, it's plus or minus that at least. The photo is just, it's a horrible image to be making such precise measurements, which are really bullshit, right? They're not, those measurements are not reliable. And they're doubly not reliable because what they're measuring isn't the thing that they think they're measuring. So if they're measuring what they're saying is a front leg or a back leg, but it's actually another leg, and then the rest of the foot is covered by leaves. So what, they're going to invent the shape of the foot? Like, again, notice the more obscurity in a cryptoid type